This is the Rich Dad Radio Show. The good news and bad news about money. Here's Robert Kiyosaki.
Hello. It's Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show. The good news and bad news about taxes and your money. My question is to you, it's approximately tax time in America, but there's different tax dates for different people in America. But anyway, let's call it taxes. How many of you would rather not pay taxes? How many are tired of paying taxes? How many are criminals and not paying your taxes illegally? And how many want to find out how the rich do not pay taxes legally? So once again, taxes are your single largest expense. So when I wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I wrote about how the rich legally minimize their taxes. So this is something that everybody should learn about. It's called taxes because for all of us, taxes are our single largest expense. Even if you don't pay income tax, everything you do is taxed. You go to the food store, things are taxed. Real estate tax, everything is taxed. And it is a serious growing problem simply because as the debt or the national debts of different countries grow, the only way they can actually pay that debt off is via taxes. And so if you sit there, and I don't know why people don't learn anything about taxes. It's just single largest expense. I think there's like 74 different taxes in America outside of income tax. But do people learn about taxes? No. But you as an individual need to know how to legally pay less taxes. So that's our program today. It's a timely program. Lots going on in America and all around the world right now because, you know, there's a song by Barry, I think it's Barry Sadler, we're on the eve of destruction. We can't keep our GDP, our gross domestic product, is not keeping up with the rate of deficit. I mean, our debt keeps going. So that means they're going to have to raise taxes somehow, and you and I will pay for it if you don't have good financial education. So Kim is not with us today. She is in California, but our special guest today on taxes is my dear friend, Rich Dad Advisor, and a man who's made me a very, very rich man, not because I made more money with him, but because he taught me how to make money and pay less taxes. And I've saved so much money by making money and paying less taxes. I mean, it's counterintuitive. You would think that if you made money, you should pay taxes. That's not true. If you have what's called like a real financial education, not that BS stuff stockbrokers tell you about or real estate agents tell you about, with a real financial education, you can make more money and pay less taxes legally. So our guest today is a kind of dear friend, Rich Dad Advisor. He's the author of the book Tax-Free Wealth. It's a second edition simply because tax laws keep changing. And is one of the most important individuals and one important books you can keep in your library. Again, Tax-Free Wealth by Tom Wheelwright, CPA. Because taxes are your single largest expense. And if you can find a way to make more money and pay less taxes, that's priceless. So welcome to the program, Tom.
Oh, thanks, Robert. It's always good being on the show. Always good.
Well, it's also fun traveling with you all over the world, because, when people say, well, you have to pay taxes. And when you and I tell them, or especially you tell them how you don't have to pay those taxes, I mean, people go a little psychotic, don't they?
They do. They can't believe that that's possible. Their paradigm is such that they just can't imagine not paying taxes.
Right. And what you talk about is basically true throughout the world, correct?
It is. What the governments do with the tax law is pretty consistent. That's what's amazing when we travel, Robert, is just how consistent the tax law is from country to country, even down to the tax rates and who pays the taxes and who gets the tax breaks.
Right. And every time we go, I mean, Tom and I have been in remote places like Kazakhstan or South Africa or Japan or Singapore or Australia, and people will always say, after we explain to them how they can make more money and pay less taxes, what's their favorite line, Tom?
It's great. You just can't do that here.
Doesn't that make you sick?
of course, this is my mission in life, right, is to educate people on the tax side of financial education, because people just do not understand that the tax law is fundamentally a series of incentives, and you just have to get on the right side of those incentives.
Right. And if you do the right things, like one of the best ones is real estate, you can make a lot more money and pay almost zero in taxes, sometimes zero, right?
Absolutely. You're just doing what the government wants you to do and what they're incentivizing you to do, and you do those things and you legally pay less tax. And it's just that those people who are paying a lot of tax either don't understand how to pay less tax, or they're just not doing the things the government wants them to do.
Well, a lot of them can't do what they need to do, because to do what they need to do does require some degree of financial education or sophistication. Would you say that's true also?
No question. I mean, it's all about financial education. If you don't understand how to do it, how would you ever do it? And to think that I ran this really recently, just last week. People say, well, I've got a great tax guy. And I'm going, well, if you've got a great tax guy, why are you paying high taxes? I mean, your tax guy can't do it. If they're not educating you, something's wrong, because it's the education that makes all the difference.
And there's one more point about taxes, is I would say 96% of all people are terrified of the tax man. And
that includes the tax advisors and the tax preparers. They're
right.
They're even more scared than the taxpayers.
Right. So your accountant or your CPA, your tax advisor, oftentimes recommends you pay taxes so they don't get in trouble. Not that you don't get in trouble, but they don't want to get in trouble. They don't want to answer to the IRS or the tax man.
That's exactly right.
So, ladies and gentlemen, if you're sitting there right now and say, well, you can't do that here, you're right. You can't do that here. Because the number one reason people cannot pay taxes, and even though they hate paying taxes, is they can't do what it takes to pay no taxes. And then they have an advisor who's terrified, who, I don't know what they do when they get up in the morning, but they're terrified of the tax man. So they want you to pay taxes, so not that you don't get in trouble, so they don't get in trouble. So really, this is the issue today. So Tom, his book again is Tax-Free Wealth. It's the second edition. Tom's website is wealthability.com. And if any investment you can make, is it stocks, is it mutual funds, is it real estate? No, buy this book. How much does your book cost, Tom?
It's less than $20, so it's a pretty good deal there for all that advice.
Yeah, it's one of the best investments you can make, because you'll make more money by making money and paying less taxes. It's that simple. But of course, some people are so afraid of the tax man, or they're so lazy they'd rather just put their money in a 401k or their retirement plan and pay huge taxes, and that's not our problem. So they'd rather just tell Tom and I, you can't do that here. So before we go on into that, so Tom, what does this President Trump do with taxes for America? Because it goes into effect now, right, this year, 2019.
It does. We're right now just going to be beginning to file tax returns under the new Trump tax law, and it changes the landscape completely. I mean, the landscape, in 1986, when we had the last big tax change under Ronald Reagan, real estate got hit hard. I mean, they lost a lot of their tax benefits. In 2017, the new law reverses that, to an extreme. So real estate becomes now a even more favored investment, and how you do it and how you deal with it during tax time is going to have a big impact. I've been dealing with it now for the last couple of months, where let's say you invest in a syndication, you invest in some real estate. How they deal with that, the syndicators on their tax return that they're preparing, and then how you deal with it on your tax return is going to be the difference between paying tax and getting a big refund.
So let's go back into it again, because you and I often discuss the 86 Tax Reform Act under Reagan, because that crashed real estate. I mean, there were so many bankruptcies in 1986 because many of these doctors and lawyers and professionals, what in the cash flow quadrant, E, S, B, and the I, the S's, were taking advantage of real estate and actually having losses and still paying no taxes. I mean, it was a complete sham. So when the government, the tax department in 86, shut down real estate, many doctors and lawyers, or the S quadrant people, got hammered. And what you're saying now for 2019, I don't know how many years that are apart, but now the real estate guys are winning again. Well, just surprise, surprise, because Trump's a real estate guy. Is that correct?
That's exactly. Surprise, surprise. And the wins are much bigger than we've ever had. I mean, Reagan in 1981 and 1982 added significant, made the depreciation a lot faster, but not like this year. Now we've got some depreciation's 100% the first year. So the magnitude, the benefits for real estate, but only if you have the financial education to take advantage of it. Because those the laws from 86 didn't go away. They didn't go away. What we have instead is, for those who are doing it the right way, who are truly professional real estate investors, the magnitude of the tax benefits have just been amplified many, many times over. So
one more thing I want to say is, please don't rush out and buy real estate for tax reasons. You never do that. It's always your intent. Your intent must be, I'm going to invest in real estate. Not your personal residence, not your little condo for your grandma in Florida. This is a business transaction. You're buying a house, commercial property, or a condo because you intend to make money, not dodge taxes. Is that correct, Tom?
That's exactly right. It really, don't let the tax tail wag the dog. You're looking for a cash flowing investment. It's like you always say, Robert, it's all about the cash flow. What we really want, though, is we want that cash flow to be magnified by A, not paying taxes on the cash flow from the real estate, and B, if we really get financially educated, then actually use the excess tax benefits from the real estate that we don't use against the real estate cash flow against other income, and that's what we've been so successful on with you, Robert.
Right. So, my favorite game is called Cash Flow because Kim and I created it. But for most people, cash is flowing out. It's not flowing in. So financial IQ is the ability to get cash flowing in and pay less taxes. Now, in one of my favorite countries in the world, they have what's called negative cash flow or negative gearing. So what they do in Australia, and they used to do it in America prior to 1986, the Tax Reform Act, they'd go out there and they'd actually buy a piece of property to lose money. So they call it negative gearing or negative cash flow. And Americans were doing it too prior to 1986. So they'd go out there and they'd say, hey, I'm going to buy this office building, and guess what? I'm going to lose a lot of money. And I would say, but that's nuts. Yes, but I get tax breaks for losing money. That's what changed in 1986, but it hasn't changed in Australia yet. Any comments on that insanity, Tom?
Yeah, actually, I think we're going to see some of that insanity here in the U.S., Robert, because the tax benefits are so great. For example, you put $200,000 down on $1 million piece of real estate. You might end up with a $300,000 deduction the first year. So you might see people who go, well, geez, the tax benefits are so high. It's no different than, people for years have, we talk about oil and gas, and you go, well, I get this great tax benefit from oil and gas, so I'm investing it. Well, but you still need to make money from it. And so the temptation is the tax benefits are so great that you look at, well, geez, maybe it's worth having a loss on the property, but it's never worth that because our tax rates are still, at the worst, only 50%. So in the U.S., so why would you spend $1 to get 50 cents back? It makes no sense.
Well, this is why it's so important right now, because Kenny McElroy, who's one of my partners in some of the real estate I have, is that we're actually selling real estate now because these private equity companies are coming in to buy a real estate. It's not bad real estate, but we're selling our worst real estate. And these guys are buying it for the tax purposes. And I'm sitting there watching this going, you guys are crazy. And that's the trouble with these private equity guys. They're not real investors. They just have a lot of money to burn. And it always causes problems. So anyway, this is a big point of this. The reason I suggest you get Tom Wheelwright's book, Tax Free Wealth, second edition, especially now with the new Trump tax law. But I would also get Kenny McElroy's book, The ABCs of Real Estate Investing, and the Advanced Guide to Real Estate and all this, because the reason I love real estate, and Tom's going to talk about this, it's one of the last investments where you can make a lot of money and pay no taxes. But that you can't do that with your 401k or your mutual funds. So I don't know why anybody's in 401ks and mutual funds, but they should be, simply because they have no financial education. If you have no real financial education or experience, you haven't taken a real estate investment course, you haven't invested in anything, stick with your 401k, your IRA, your Roth IRA, and your ETFs. I mean, that's what they're made for, is people like you. But when we come back, we'll be talking to Tom about what questions you need to ask your tax advisor, before you file your return, but also more important, what do you have to do to earn more money and pay less taxes? To just sit there and complain about your tax bill is really, really limp. You're just weak. So when we come back, we'll have Tom. We're talking more about what you have to do to make more money and pay less taxes all over the world.
You're listening to The Rich Dad Radio Show with Robert Kiyosaki.
Don't be like Charlie. Charlie is that do-it-yourselfer who does himself in. Do-it-yourself is good for tile and grout. It is not good for asset protection. Charlie thought he'd save a few dollars forming his LLC online. With no guidance, he did it wrong. When he sold the property, he lost thousands and thousands of dollars. He did himself in by trying to do it himself. Don't burn yourself. Use Corporate Direct to set up and maintain your LLCs and corporations. Corporate Direct is owned and operated by attorney and rich dad advisor Garrett Sutton. Garrett wrote the bestsellers Loopholes of Real Estate and Start Your Own Corporation. He is Robert Kiyosaki's attorney for asset protection. He and his team will do it right. Visit them at corporatedirect.com or call 800-600-1760. Mention Rich Dad and receive $100 off your formation fee. That's corporatedirect.com. corporatedirect.com.
Financial freedom begins with financial education. Now back to Robert Kiyosaki and the Rich Dad Radio Show.
Welcome back, Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show, the good news and bad news about money. And today our special guest is Tom Wheelwright, Rich Dad Advisor, author of Tax-Free Wealth, the second edition. And Tom's website is wealthability.com. And we're talking about taxes, your single largest expense. But we're also talking about how you can actually and legally make more money and pay less taxes. But once again, I'll remind you that you can listen to the Rich Dad Radio program anytime, anywhere on iTunes or Android. And you can listen to this podcast again at richdadradio.com, because we believe in education, and repetition is one of the best ways to be better educated. So if you want to learn more about taxes, go to richdadradio.com, listen to this podcast one more time with Tom and myself, and you will learn even more, because you'll retain more the second time. You hear it a second time, I didn't hear that before. But most importantly, if you have friends, family, and business associates who hate paying taxes or believe in paying taxes, you should have them listen to this program, because the number one reason people pay taxes, it's actually two reasons, is they have no financial education because they went to school, and second, they're terrified of the taxman. So you don't have to be terrified of the taxman, because as Tom writes about in his book, Tax-Free Wealth, the tax laws are incentives. You're just doing what the government wants you to do. For example, if you donate to charity, they give you a tax break for that. They do a lot of things because they want you to do certain things. So the reason they give tax breaks for real estate guys who invest in rental properties, not private residences, is because the government needs you to provide housing. And I get tax breaks for oil and gas, because without those tax breaks, America would be buying more oil and gas from Saudi Arabia. So there's reasons the tax laws are written as incentives, are not punishment. And that's what Tom covers in his book, Tax-Free Wealth. So Tom, one more thing is important, is that the tax laws probably have to go up. The tax rates have to go up because interest rates have been low, but also because the national debt keeps going up. So what's the correlation between the national debt and why the government is shut down right now as we talk, and taxes?
Well, I mean, obviously, the only way to pay off that debt, there's really only two ways. One is through inflation, and the other is through taxes. But ultimately, it's going to be tax inflation that pays for the government debt because, we're at historically low tax rates in the U.S. right now. We have lowest corporate tax rates we've ever had, 21%, and we have extraordinarily low personal income tax rates. When you compare to what we see when we travel abroad, Robert, the tax rates in the U.S. are way low. And so what you're doing is for those of you in a 401k, you're actually taking a tax deduction at a low rate, and then you're going to pay it back at the rates that are there, 10, 20 years from now when they inevitably have to raise rates to pay for the debt, because eventually that debt does have to get paid. So it's really a losing battle if you're thinking, well, I'm going to get this great tax break, when you don't really get a tax break. You just postpone the inevitable, but you postpone it to a later year when you're going to literally, unless you're going to retire and live under a park bench, you're going to pay much higher taxes. So it's very important to be looking at real tax planning, which is real financial education.
Very, very good. As a man named Vladimir Lenin said, the best way to crush the proletariat or the bourgeoisie, which is the middle class, is via inflation and taxes. And that's what's happening right now. The middle class is disappearing in America. The poor are getting poorer, and the rich are not paying taxes legally. So as Lenin said, and that's why I think most school teachers are actually kind of leaning on the Lenin side, of life here, which is communism, socialism, and fascism, is that the reason they're that way is they really don't know anything about money. And most school teachers are teaching people that the rich are the problem, that the capitalists are the bad guys. The really bad guys are the school teachers, because they don't teach you anything about this stuff. So that's why if you be careful when you send your kid to school, or you went to school, and your school teacher has a hammer and sickle on their lapel button, you know they're teaching you to pay, and Lenin said, taxes and inflation will crush the bourgeoisie. Bourgeoisie is the middle class. So Rich Dad doesn't want you to be middle class, so that's why guys like Tom come on and talk to you. So as Tom was talking about your 401k, your IRA, your Roth IRA, there's better ways of paying less taxes. Is that what you're saying, Tom?
No, exactly. Instead of looking at the easy way out, which is, like you always say, save money, and buy a well-diversified portfolio of mutual funds, you get a little financial education. You learn that, the government, this new tax law, businesses have never been better. So even a home-based business is a terrific tax opportunity. When we talk about real estate, by the way, that includes your home office. That is real estate. So that gets those tax benefits from real estate that, if you could go out and invest in rental property, you could also have a home office if you have a home-based business. So you don't have to be big. You just have to understand that the laws were written for business and investing, and that's what they were. So there's real estate, there's oil and gas, there's all sorts of clean energy type tax benefits. So the benefits are out there, and you just have to find them.
I get into a lot of trouble because a lot of my friends have kids that are going on to college, and I say, going to school is a waste of time, and they just go nuts on me. And I'm not saying education's bad. I'm saying they're not learning anything about money. And that what they don't learn about is taxes. And what they're taught to do, which is, as Tom says, go to school, get a job, work hard, save money, get out of debt, and invest in the stock market, is the worst thing you can do for tax purposes. Is that correct, Tom?
Well, there's no question. It's just a matter of, do you want to not pay taxes ever, or do you want to just not pay taxes today? If you want to just not pay tax today and you don't care about tomorrow, then 401k is just fine. But if you want to not pay taxes ever, then you have to start looking at really becoming a professional investor and a business owner, because that's where, and this is true throughout the world, by the way. This is not just the U.S., that if you look at the tax benefits worldwide, then you're going to find that business owners and and professional investors. This is real investors, not those who put their money in the stock market, but those who actually invest in actual investment activities like real estate, energy, et cetera. They're the ones who are getting the tax breaks because they're doing what the government's saying, look, we need more investment in real estate. And we've seen the huge housing boom here in the U.S. from a rental standpoint. Well, that's, the government wants that to happen because there's been such a lack of rental properties. So there's that encouragement, or the opportunity zones that we have now in the U.S. under this new tax law where we have horrible, really difficult pockets in the country, and every city has them. We have them here in Phoenix. You have difficult parts where you'd really like to redevelop it. You'd like to improve that area, but in order to do so, the government now is giving you tax benefits. So just look at, okay, what do I want? What does the government want me to do? And just go do it. You'll pay much less tax.
So let me. I always ask this when Tom and I are on stage throughout the world, and this is true for all of you listening from all over the world. If you have a job, if you're an employee in the cash flow quadrant, E, S, B, and I. E stands for employee, S stands for small business, self-employed, or specialist, and B stands for big business, 500 employees or more, or I stands for investor, professional investor, or inside investor. If you have a job, is there much you can do for that person as far as taxes, Tom?
There's not. If that's all you do, if you're not out, learning how to be an investor or starting a business, there's just very little available in any country. That's where you end up in the 401k or a pension plan, or in Canada an RSP or a superannuation in Australia, which actually is kind of a cool opportunity in Australia. So if you're Australian, you've got one of the better opportunities there. But really, there's not a whole lot. No, there's not a whole lot you can do if that's all you're doing. But with the right education, anybody can do the same things that the rich do.
Yeah, and so that's why I was at in my vacation home and over Christmas, and I was talking to my friend who has 3 kids in school, and she just went nuts. I said, "What are your kids learning about taxes?" "I just want them to get through school." I said, "And then what happens? They still learn nothing about taxes." It's really interesting. Their minds are closed to their single largest expense. Doesn't that shock you, Tom?
It's always shocking. What's even more shocking is when I have, we're out there speaking, and I ask people how many people have been told by a tax professional to not take a tax benefit they were entitled to, and 90% of the hands go up. I'm going, so not only do we not have financial education in the public schools, but we don't have financial education among the tax preparers and the tax advisors for the most part. It's right. Shocking.
It's so, and they're terrified. They're either lazy, terrified, or all of the above. I don't want to buy real estate. I was over Christmas dinner this year. I almost got into a fight because I was saying, God, I love crashes. I said, yeah, you were on television saying you love crashes. Now, these poor guys are my age, they're baby boomers, and they're getting hammered because the stock market is crashing. So they're selling to avoid, losing any more money. So, Tom, what happens when they sell their stocks if they have huge gains?
Well, so they sell, and then they end up paying taxes on those gains, of course.
So they lose more money.
Or even worse, they sell it. It's in their IRA or their 401k or their RSP, and they pull the money out and they pay tax at ordinary income rates. They're not even paying capital gains rates. So they pay these huge taxes in order to deal with the market fluctuations, which is a real challenge.
Well, the whole thing is fear. They're just panicking. They say, "How can you say you love crashes?" And I say, well, it's like it's like Walmart having a sale. If Walmart, in their food department say, well, T-bone steaks used to be $10 a pound. Today they're $1 a pound. Most people would run in and buy T-bone steaks. But if Apple is, let's say, $100 a share, and today it's $50 a share, most people run away. I would be running in buying, if I liked Apple, I'd be buying Apple shares or Amazon shares, something like this, because the market crashed. But the average person without financial education, so they panic. Apple has made huge capital, because of the whole stock market's manipulated. But Apple has made so many huge gains. Amazon also, the FANG stars. What's that? Facebook, Apple, Netflix, and Google. They made so much money because it's all goosed, it's all manipulated. So they panic and they sold all those stocks. And they have capital gains. Is that correct, Tom?
Yeah, but for most of them, because they bought. They bought at a much lower price, and now they're selling. Well, what's even worse is some of the mutual funds. So some of the mutual funds sold. You may even have a loss economically, but because the mutual fund had a gain in their purchase price of the stock, you end up with a taxable gain, even though you had an economic loss. That's even worse.
It's called a pass-through. They pass on the taxes to you.
Right.
It's so bad. But let me say it before we go to break here. If you have no financial education, get a job, work hard, save money, get out of debt, buy a house, and invest for the long term in the stock market, because that's all you can do without financial education. So we come back. We're going to the next favorite part of our program is Ask Robert. And Tom has stayed. It's great to stay on to answer your specific tax questions.
You're listening to the Rich Dad Radio Show with Robert Kiyosaki.
What is your number one expense in life? Your number one expense. It's taxes. And I've asked the question is, how come there's no financial education in school, but why isn't there education on taxes either? They tell you to save money, which is stupid. They tell you to invest in the stock market, which is stupid. But won't they teach you about taxes? So here we have Rich Dad advisor Tom Wheelwright. We're talking about his revision for his book, Tax-Free Wealth. Welcome, Tom.
Thanks, Robert.
So what's the tax-free wealth about? What's different this time? It's a revised edition.
Well, so what we did was this is the first major tax reform we've had in 30 years, 2017.
Was 86 was the last one?
86 was the last one, back when I was in Washington, D.C.
So many guys got wiped out because of that tax change.
They did. It wiped out an entire industry, savings and loans. This new tax law is just as big, but in a very different way. It affects different industries. The tax law is always a series of incentives. And the question is always which incentives and which ones apply to me. And so the key to revising tax-free wealth was, what changed so much in this new tax law that we can absolutely take advantage of? And seriously, the amazing incentives. For example, the bonus depreciation, for example, for real estate is unbelievable. You buy a $1 million apartment, get a $300,000 deduction or more the very first year.
So if you want to make more money and pay less taxes like Donald Trump and myself, get Tom's book, Tax-Free Wealth.
Don't be like Charlie. Charlie is that do-it-yourselfer who does himself in. Do-it-yourself is good for tile and grout. It is not good for asset protection. Charlie thought he'd save a few dollars forming his LLC online. With no guidance, he did it wrong. When he sold the property, he lost thousands and thousands of dollars. He did himself in by trying to do it himself. Don't burn yourself. Use Corporate Direct to set up and maintain your LLCs and corporations. Corporate Direct is owned and operated by attorney and Rich Dad advisor Garrett Sutton. Garrett wrote the bestsellers Loopholes of Real Estate and Start Your Own Corporation. He is Robert Kiyosaki's attorney for asset protection. He and his team will do it right. Visit them at corporatedirect.com or call 800-600-1760. Mention Rich Dad and receive $100 off your formation fee. That's corporatedirect.com. corporatedirect.com.
It pays to listen. Now back to Robert Kiyosaki and the Rich Dad Radio Show.
Welcome back, Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show. The good news and bad news about your taxes. That's good. It's getting around tax time. And once again, taxes are your single largest expense, but most people know jack about taxes. It's really disgusting. And it's, as Vladimir Lenin said, the best way to grind the bourgeoisie, which is the middle class, and the proletariat, which are the poor, is to grind them between taxes and inflation. And that's what's happening as we speak. Once again, you can listen to the Rich Dad Radio program anytime, anywhere on iTunes or Android, and all of our programs are archived at richdadradio.com. So you can listen to this program again. You listen to this program 2-3 times, and you share it with your friends, family, and business associates. You'll learn a lot more because repetition is one of the best ways to learn. So go to richdadradio.com, and you can listen to this program with Tom Wheelwright, Rich Dad Advisor, author of Tax-Free Wealth. And his website, Tom's website is wealthability.com. Wealthability.com. And now it comes to the most favorite part of our program is Ask Robert, where you get to submit your questions. So you want to submit your questions to Ask Robert at richdadradio.com. And Tom's agreed to stay with us to answer your questions because I know jack about taxes. So, Melissa, what's the first question for Ask Robert and Tom? Because I'm not going to answer the question.
Our first question today comes from Christy in Los Angeles. Favorite book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is proposing a 70% marginal tax rate on earnings above $10 million, which she refers to as the tippy top of the income scale. First, do you think this is plausible? And second, if so, what would the wealthy do in that scenario?
That's a great question, and she's a very powerful force, this young woman. I think she's, they portray her as a bartender, and she's young and attractive. I think she's under 30, and she's kicking butt out there. And she makes a lot of sense. I listened to her on 60 Minutes. She made sense. She says, why are we spending so much money on the military but ignoring our own people? And I can't fault her for her logic system. But I don't think she knows jack about taxes either. So if you're making $10 million and you're an employee, you're really an idiot because there's other things you can do. So I think it's best. So I'm not against her or pro her and all this. I'm just saying she doesn't know anything about taxes. That's all I'm saying. So Tom, what would you say to that?
Well, it's an interesting proposal in the first place because it is the tippy top of taxpayers. What's so interesting, though, is Robert, as you know, with the right financial education, you can make $100 million a year and have less than $10 million of taxable income. So those.
We must say that again. You can earn $100 million a year,
but $100 million a year and have less than $10 million of taxable income,
which is good.
So. Which is great. Okay, so those people, I was as I hear this question, I'm going, well, this is not going to affect my clients at all because clients make a lot of money, but they're going to show less than $10 million of income. You're exactly right. It's the CEOs, the corporate executives, the entertainers, the athletes. It's these people that make a lot of money in the E and the S quadrants. They're the ones who would be subject to this tax. Those with the good tax advisors, good tax education, who are investing their money and building businesses, I don't think they're going to be subject to that tax. So is it plausible? I mean, the answer is yeah, absolutely. And I don't frankly care one way or the other because my clients aren't going to be affected.
Yeah, I mean, Tom's answer is exactly correct. It's not how much money you make, but it's how you make your money. If you make your money as an employee at $10 million, you're really an idiot. I would be talking to your board of directors to figure out how I can take that money in different ways, not as income, not on a W-2 or taxable income statement. Is that correct, Tom?
Yeah, for sure. I think what you would end up with is you certainly would end up with a lot more stock options and money being made that way. Because hopefully capital gains, they would not include capital gains, which I think that would be an important distinction. But I think you would change people's behavior. And the reality is what she doesn't understand is that the very rich can afford really good tax advice and they can afford good investment advisors. And frankly, if they're showing taxable income over $10 million, then, it's kind of a stupid tax is what it would be. So.
Yeah, and that's my point. So she's getting political votes, so everybody goes, yeah, let's tax those guys making $10 million. But hey, sports fans, anybody making $10 million is not that stupid. And she's very smart. She's very bright, very attractive, but she knows jack about taxes. And the thing about what Tom is talking about is why the stock market is crashing today is because most of those CEOs, they didn't take their money in salaries. They took it in stock options. Because exactly as Tom says, if they took it as salary, they would be paying ordinary income. But the CEOs of the major companies like General Electric, which is toast, and Chipotle, which is toast, and all these companies which are toast, is because the CEOs borrowed money from the company to buy back their stock. So instead of growing the company, the CEOs just bought back their stocks, which goose the stock price, and then they sell and they take their capital, they get their capital gains tax. So they pay less taxes than ordinary income. Is that so? Tom, what is the tax rate on capital gains versus ordinary income?
Right. So tax rate on capital gains, really the maximum tax rate is 24% on capital gains, whereas ordinary income, the tax rate's 37%. So there's already a big differential. So if you make that differential bigger by going 24 versus 70%, imagine what behaviors are going to change.
Right. So she sounds good, but she's only talking to idiots. Next question there, Melissa.
Our next question comes from Thomas. How can one move money from an IRA 401k account, which isn't providing cash flow as you advocate, into assets that do provide cash flow? How can you minimize taxes and penalties when doing this?
Well, let me first say something. It's providing cash flow, but not to you. Understand that. It's providing a lot of cash flow, but none of it's going into your pockets. So I have a new book coming out called Fake. Fake money, fake T-shirts, and fake assets. Most people in these mutual funds and ETFs and things like that, the assets are not your assets. The assets are Wall Street's assets. So there's a lot of cash flow, but it's flowing into Wall Street's pockets, not your pockets. That's how silly people are. So that's really number one. So the question is a very important question because Tom will give you some ideas how you can change your thinking and reverse which direction the cash is flowing to and from. Right now, it's your cash flowing to the ETF or mutual fund, and then it flows into Wall Street's pockets. That's why your IRA, your mutual funds, and your ETFs are Wall Street's assets, but not your assets. Comments, Tom?
Yeah. So first of all, people get really hung up on, if I pull it out, I'll pay tax. Well, you already owe the tax. It's kind of like back in 2008, 2009, people said, well, if I sell my property, I have a loss. No, you already had a loss. It's just if you sell it, then you're actually going to recognize that loss. But the property had gone down in value. So you still owe that tax. It's just that, are you going to pay it now or are you going to pay it later? But you're going to pay it when you use the money. So you really kind of have to ignore the tax part of it. There's a penalty. So if you're under 59.5 in the U.S., there's a 10% penalty. Okay, so then what you have to do is when you pull that money out, make sure that you have a plan for investing that money that is a tax-wise plan, because the tax benefits of investing, like we've been talking about, whether it's real estate, oil and gas, energy, business, the tax benefits are so great that they'll more than offset, they'll actually more than offset both the taxes and the penalties if you do it right. So it's a matter of sitting down with a tax advisor and saying, okay, what are you going to use this money for? How can I partner with the government to use this money in such a way that I'm not going to get hit with big taxes and penalties, because I'm going to offset that with my investment tax benefits.
Right, and the people got hammered because they pulled that money out and then they spent it. Now they have more tax problems. Right. So anyway, that's why thank you for your questions for Ask Robert. I trust they kind of enlightened you, but the real answer is ask Tom. I would buy his book, Tax-Free Wealth, $20, second edition. If you really want to educate your children, don't send them to school. Buy them Tom's book. And they'll understand why the rich are getting richer and why Vladimir Lenin says the best way to grind the poor and the middle class, the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, is via inflation and taxes. And that's what's happening today, because our school systems basically are run by people who are Lenin followers. They follow Lenin to the T, but they don't know it. That's the problem. Without financial education, you do not know whose financial philosophy you are following. So, Tom, thanks again. Look forward to traveling on the road again. We'll get together soon. And you can submit your questions to Ask Robert at richdadradio.com. Thank you all for listening.
Hiu hiu chưa hè mùa lụt nước lũ bắt